The Oracle's hull creaked as we descended through the final thermal layer, and I pressed my face closer to the viewport. 3 kilometers south of Crete, 4,000 meters down, and my hands wouldn't stop shaking. Not from the cold, the submersible's heating worked fine, but from what we were about to find. Magnetic resonance is still picking up the anomaly, Ben called from his station, fingers dancing across the sensor array. Whatever's down there, it's definitely not natural rock formation. Javi adjusted our descent angle with the kind of smooth precision that came from years of deep-sea piloting. How sure are we about those readings, Doc? I checked the data again, even though I'd memorized every detail during our 2-hour descent. The scanner doesn't lie. We're looking at worked stone, definitely Bronze Age construction techniques. But that's impossible. Impossible how? Javi glanced back at me, one eyebrow raised. Minoans never built anything below sea level, let alone at abyssal depths. Their civilization peaked around 1500 BCE, and they were strictly coastal. This depth... I gestured at the crushing blackness outside. Nothing human has ever been built down here. Ben's sonar pinged steadily, mapping the seafloor below us. Contact, large structure, bearing 270, range 800 meters. My stomach tightened. After 3 years of hunting for proof that Minoan influence extended beyond Crete, I'd finally convinced the university to fund this expedition. The magnetic anomaly had shown up on deep-sea mining surveys, a geometric signature that screamed artificial construction. But seeing it on instruments was different from actually being here, suspended in the void above something that shouldn't exist. Bringing us around for visual contact, Javi announced. Floodlights coming online. The Oracle's powerful LED arrays blazed to life, cutting through the eternal darkness like white-hot knives. For a moment, all I could see was the swirling sediment kicked up by our thrusters. Then the water cleared, and my breath caught. Rising from the abyssal plain stood a gate. Not ruins, not scattered stones. A complete, intact gate, easily 20 meters tall and carved from massive blocks of limestone. The familiar double-horn motifs of Minoan architecture decorated its surface, and I could make out the flowing curves of linear A script etched deep into the stone. Jesus Christ, Ben whispered. Javi brought us to a hover 50 meters out, the Oracle's lights playing across the monument's surface. That's definitely not a rock formation. I couldn't speak. My archaeological training screamed that this was impossible, but there it was, unmistakably Minoan craftsmanship standing on the ocean floor like some fever dream. The proportions were perfect, the carving techniques identical to what I'd studied at Knossos and Phaistos. But those sites were on dry land, built for a civilization that worshipped the sea from a safe distance. Ilara? Javi's voice seemed to come from very far away. You okay back there? Take us closer, I managed. I need to see the inscriptions. Ben was already recording everything, the Oracle's cameras capturing high-resolution images from multiple angles. The construction material definitely isn't local. This limestone doesn't match anything from the Aegean basin. That detail hit me like a physical blow. Someone had quarried these stones elsewhere, shaped them into this massive gate, and somehow transported them to the deepest part of the Mediterranean. The logistics alone would challenge modern engineering, let alone Bronze Age technology. Javi maneuvered us in a slow circle around the structure, and I pressed against the viewport, trying to absorb every detail. The gate stood completely alone. No city, no settlement, no other structures visible in any direction. Just this single monolithic marker rising from the sediment like a tombstone. Look at the base, Ben said, pointing at his sonar display. It's not sitting on the seafloor. The foundation goes down at least another 10 meters. I studied the gate's positioning, and a cold realization crept up my spine. The structure wasn't oriented toward any particular direction that would make sense for a city entrance. Instead, it faced directly into the deepest part of the trench, where our lights couldn't penetrate the crushing darkness beyond. "This isn't a gate to something," I said quietly. "It's a gate away from something." Javi glanced back at me. "What do you mean?" I traced the familiar bullhorn symbols with my eyes, but now they look different. Not celebratory or decorative, but warning. Protective. Minoans built gates at the entrances to sacred spaces, but also at boundaries, places where people weren't supposed to go. The oracle drifted closer, and I could make out individual chisel marks in the stone. Whoever had carved this had taken incredible care, working with the precision of master craftsmen. But why go to such effort for something no one would ever see? "Ben, can you get a reading on what's beyond the gate?" He adjusted his sonar array, sending pulses into the darkness past the monument. "There's definitely more sea floor back there, but the topography gets weird. Looks like the trench continues deeper, maybe splits into multiple channels." I watched the gate's carved surface, and the linear A script seemed to writhe in the shifting light from our floods. I'd spent years learning to read the ancient language, but these symbols felt different somehow. Urgent. "This was placed here deliberately," I said, more to myself than to the others. "Not built here. Placed. Like a marker." "Marking what?" Javi asked. I stared into the black water beyond the gate, where our lights faded into nothingness. "That's what we need to find out." But even as I said it, something deep in my chest whispered that maybe some boundaries were meant to stay intact. 20 minutes into our analysis, I had my tablet balanced against the viewport, frantically cross-referencing linear A symbols, while Ben ran spectral analysis on the gate's stone composition. The familiar academic rush of deciphering ancient text kept my hands steady, but what I was reading made my stomach clench tighter with each translated glyph. "This isn't what I expected," I muttered, stylus moving across the tablet as I worked through another sequence of symbols. "What do you mean?" Ben glanced up from his instruments, where readouts showed the limestone's mineral signature. I pointed at a series of carved panels near the gate's base. "These aren't celebration scenes or religious imagery. Look at these figures here." I traced the human shapes with my finger against the glass. The text labels them as sun dwellers. That's us. Surface people. Javi adjusted our position slightly, keeping the oracle's remaining lights focused on the inscription panels. "And the other figures?" "The other figures." I'd been avoiding those, hoping my initial interpretation was wrong. But the more I studied them, the clearer their meaning became. Elongated bodies, disproportionately large heads, limbs that stretched too long to be human. They moved through the carved scenes with predatory grace, surrounding the surface dwellers in coordinated groups. "Hunters," I said quietly. "The pale figures are hunting the humans." Ben's scanner beeped, and he frowned at the results. "Stone composition confirms this definitely isn't local material. The mineral content doesn't match anything from the Mediterranean basin. Someone quarried this limestone elsewhere and transported it here." The logistics of that hit me again. Moving these massive blocks across the ancient world, then somehow getting them to the ocean floor, the engineering required would challenge modern capabilities, let alone Bronze Age technology. "Why go to that much trouble for a warning sign?" Javi asked. I kept translating, working through the flowing script that spiraled around the gate's perimeter. The story it told grew more disturbing with each panel. Surface dwellers descending into deep places, the pale hunters emerging from caves and chasms, coordinated attacks, bodies being dragged into the abyss. Because whatever they encountered down here was worth warning every future generation about, I said. Ben leaned closer to his display, studying the predator figures I'd highlighted. Look at the anatomical details in these carvings. The elongated limbs, the oversized craniums. These aren't mythological creatures. Someone carved these from direct observation. He was right. The figures showed specific adaptations, enlarged heads that suggested enhanced brain capacity or specialized sensory organs, elongated fingers that could be webbed for swimming, bodies built for moving through water rather than on land. Deep-sea adaptations, Ben continued. If these things were real, they'd be perfectly evolved for abyssal environments. Javi brought us around to the gate's far side, where more inscription panels caught our lights. How much more of this warning is there? I worked through the new sections, and the repeated symbols started forming a clear pattern. The same glyph keeps appearing. It means death from below, and it's carved around the entire perimeter like a boundary marker. So this is definitely territorial, Ben said. More than that. I found the final panel, where the largest inscription dominated the stone surface. This is a treaty boundary. The Minoans made some kind of agreement. They'd stay above, and the hunters would stay below. Javi was quiet for a moment, studying the dark water beyond the gate. And we just crossed into their territory. The thought sent ice through my veins. I looked at the hunting scenes again, noting how the pale figures moved in coordinated groups, using tactics and strategy rather than brute force. These weren't mindless monsters from ancient mythology. The carvings showed intelligence, organization, purpose. We need to document everything and get out of here, I said. But Javi was already adjusting our heading, pointing the oracle toward the darkness past the gate. We came here to make a discovery, Alara. This is the biggest archaeological find in history. We can't just turn around now. The warning is clear. The warning is 3,000 years old, Javi interrupted. Whatever the Minoans encountered, it's probably long extinct. We have modern technology, sonar, communication with the surface. We're not Bronze Age sailors stumbling around in the dark. Ben looked between us, torn. The scientific value would be incredible. If there's more evidence of this civilization beyond the gate. I stared at the carved hunters, their elongated forms frozen in eternal pursuit of surface prey. The ancient artists had captured something in those figures, not just their physical appearance, but their intelligence. The way they coordinated attacks, the precision of their movements, the calculated nature of their hunting strategies. These aren't extinct, I said. Look at the preservation of this gate. Look at how deliberately it was placed. This isn't an ancient warning about something that used to live here. It's an active boundary marker. Javi's hand moved toward the thruster controls. Only one way to find out. The oracle began moving forward, past the gate's massive pillars and into the territory the ancient Minoans had marked as forbidden. I watched the warning symbols disappear behind us, swallowed by the darkness, and wondered if we'd just made the last mistake of our lives. Javi's hands moved across the control panel with practiced confidence, bringing us closer to the gate's massive foundation. Just a quick scan of the base structure. If there are more inscriptions down there, we need to document them. Javi, we should... 5 minutes, Alara. That's all I need. The oracle descended smoothly toward the gate's lower sections, where centuries of sediment had built up around the limestone blocks. Our high-resolution cameras whirred as they focused on the ancient stonework, and I could see more linear A script carved into the foundation stones. The symbols looked different here, more urgent, more desperate. Ben leaned over his instruments, adjusting the camera angles. Getting some great detail shots of the lower inscriptions, These look like they were carved later, maybe added after the original construction. I pressed closer to the viewport, trying to make out the new symbols. The script was rougher here, less refined than the careful work on the upper sections. Like someone had been in a hurry. That's when it hit us. The pulse slammed into the Oracle's hull with the force of a physical blow. The entire submersible shuddered, and I grabbed my workstation as the sound reverberated through the frame like a massive bell being struck. But this wasn't just noise. It was structured, complex, layered with harmonics that seemed to probe every surface of our hull. What the hell was that? Javi's hands flew across his controls, checking system status. Ben stared at his instruments, face pale. Biosonar, but not like anything I've ever recorded. The pulse came again, even stronger this time. The Oracle's lights flickered and I watched our external floods dim and die one by one. The sample collection arms went limp, their control systems sparking with electrical feedback. Systems are failing, Javi reported, his voice tight. Navigation's throwing error codes. External lighting is completely offline. Ben's fingers danced across his sensor array, pulling up readings that made his face go white. This wasn't random. The pulse was focused, targeted, like something was scanning us for weak points. The darkness outside our viewports was now absolute. Without the external floods, we were blind in the crushing black of the abyss. The Oracle drifted in the current, its damaged systems leaving us helpless. Then the clicking started. It came through Ben's hydrophones first, faint, rhythmic sounds that seemed to echo from multiple directions. But as I listened, the pattern became clear. This wasn't the random noise of deep-sea creatures. The clicks had structure, rhythm, purpose. That's language, Ben whispered, adjusting his audio pickups. Complex communication patterns, multiple sources. The clicking grew more elaborate, different rhythms overlapping and responding to each other. I could hear at least 3 distinct sources, maybe more, coordinating their signals in a way that spoke of intelligence and organization. They're talking about us, I said, ice spreading through my chest. Javi worked frantically to restart the external lighting systems, but the circuits were completely fried. Whatever that pulse was, it targeted our electronics specifically. This wasn't an accident. Ben pulled up his bioacoustic analysis, and the readings confirmed my worst fears. The communication patterns are too complex for simple animal behavior. This is sophisticated language, with syntax and response structures. The clicking continued, growing more frequent and urgent. Through the hydrophones, I could hear the sounds moving around us, circling, coordinating, planning. We triggered something, I said, some kind of detection system. Javi tried every backup system he could think of, but the Oracle remained blind and crippled. External cameras are dead, lights are gone, and half our navigation systems are offline. The clicking sounds shifted, becoming more synchronized. Whatever was out there in the darkness, they'd finished their discussion. Now they were moving to action. Ben monitored his remaining instruments, tracking the acoustic signatures as they moved through the water around us. Multiple contacts, large objects, maintaining formation at approximately 60 meters distance. I stared into the black water beyond our viewport, knowing that something was watching us from the darkness. The ancient warning carved into the gate had been clear. Death from below. And we'd just announced our presence to whatever had been waiting in the abyss for 3,000 years. The Oracle sat motionless in the crushing dark while invisible predators circled like sharks, and I realized we'd crossed more than just a territorial boundary. We'd walked into a trap that had been waiting since the Bronze Age for the next group of surface dwellers foolish enough to ignore the warnings. The silence hit like a physical weight. After the constant clicking, The sudden absence of sound felt wrong, like the moment before a predator strikes. Come on, Javi muttered, his fingers flying across the camera controls. Sparks flickered from damaged circuits as he tried to coax life back into our visual systems. External camera 3 is showing signs of power. Maybe I can... Movement, Ben interrupted, his voice tight. Hydrophones are picking up displacement patterns. Large objects, multiple contacts. I pressed my face against the main viewport, straining to see anything in the crushing darkness beyond our emergency lighting. The Oracle's backup illumination created a pathetic bubble of visibility, maybe 10 meters at most. Beyond that, nothing but black water that could hide an army. A flash of pale motion swept through the edge of our lights. Did you see that? I grabbed Ben's shoulder, pointing at where the shape had vanished back into darkness. See what? Javi didn't look up from his repairs. Ben adjusted his sonar array, and his face went white. Contact. Bearing 090, range 50 meters, large object approximately 2 meters in length. The pale shape darted past again, this time closer. Too fast to focus on, but the proportions were all wrong. Too long, too fluid, moving through the water with impossible grace. There's another one, Ben said, watching his instruments. Bearing 270. Same size, same movement pattern. Javi managed to bring camera 3 back online, its feed flickering to life on the main display. The image was grainy and distorted, but it gave us a narrow cone of vision into the abyss. He panned it slowly, searching for whatever was out there. Got something, he said. A pale form swept across the camera's field of view, and this time we all saw it clearly. Elongated limbs that moved with predatory purpose. An oversized head that seemed designed for something other than human thought. The creature moved through the water like it had been born there, every motion perfectly adapted for the crushing depths. Jesus, Ben whispered. That's not human. But it wasn't entirely inhuman either. The basic structure was recognizable. Head, torso, 4 limbs. Like someone had taken human anatomy and stretched it, refined it, evolved it for a completely different environment. Ben's sonar painted a picture that made my blood freeze. 6 contacts now. They're maintaining formation around us. Perfect circle, 50-meter radius. I watched the camera feed as another shape glided past, and the intelligence in its movement was unmistakable. This wasn't random animal behavior. These things were studying us, coordinating their approach, planning something. They're hunting, I said. The creatures stayed just beyond our visual range, but I could feel them out there, watching, waiting. The ancient carvings on the gate flashed through my mind. Pale figures surrounding surface dwellers, moving with tactical precision. This is what the Minoans were warning about, I said. The hunters from the deep. Javi panned the camera in a slow arc, trying to track the movement patterns. They're keeping their distance. Maybe they're just curious. Curious predators don't maintain attack formations, Ben said, studying his readings. Look at this positioning. They've got us completely surrounded, and they're staying at optimal striking distance. The clicking started again, but now it came from multiple directions. Different rhythms, different tones, overlapping and responding to each other in complex patterns. Through the hydrophones, the sounds painted an acoustic picture of coordination and intelligence. They're talking, Ben said, sharing information about us. I listened to the clicking patterns, and the hair on my arms stood up. The sounds weren't random or emotional. They were structured, purposeful, tactical, like soldiers coordinating an assault. How long until we can restore thruster power? I asked. Javi shook his head. The biopulse fried most of our external systems. I might be able to get partial power back, but it'll take time. Time we might not have. The clicking grew more frequent, more urgent, as if the creatures were reaching some kind of decision. Through the camera feed, I caught glimpses of pale forms moving closer, testing our defenses. Ben monitored the acoustic patterns, his face growing paler with each exchange. The communication is getting more complex. They're definitely planning something. I stared into the darkness beyond our lights, knowing that 6 apex predators were circling us like sharks. The ancient warning had been clear: death from below. And we'd ignored it, sailed right past the boundary markers into their hunting grounds. The Oracle drifted helplessly in the current, while invisible killers coordinated our destruction in a language older than human civilization. We'd come looking for archaeological evidence, but instead we'd found something that should have stayed buried in the abyss. The clicking reached a crescendo, then stopped abruptly. In the sudden silence, I knew they'd finished planning. Now came the execution. The first projectile hit with a sharp metallic ping that rang through the Oracle's hull like a struck bell. Then another. Then a rapid volley that sounded like hail on a tin roof. "What the hell?" Javi's hands flew to his instrument panel as warning lights began flashing across the external system's display. Ben hunched over his sensors, trying to track the incoming objects. Projectiles, multiple contacts, small and fast. They're targeting our equipment. I pressed against the viewport, but the darkness beyond our emergency lights revealed nothing. The pinging continued in precise bursts, each impact followed by the distinctive crack of braking equipment. "Camera 2 is offline," Javi reported, his voice tight. "Camera 4 just went dark." Ben pulled up the acoustic analysis of the impacts. "These aren't random strikes. Look at the trajectory patterns. They're aiming for specific targets." Another volley struck, and I watched our last external camera feed flicker and die. The display went black, leaving us completely blind to whatever was happening outside our hull. "That's it," Javi said. "Visual systems are completely down." Ben studied the acoustic signature of the projectiles, his face growing pale. "These aren't metal fragments or debris. The density readings suggest organic material, calcium carbonate structures like bone or shell." "Bone?" I stared at his readings, trying to process what that meant. "Hardened organic projectiles fired with enough velocity to damage our equipment. Whatever's out there has some kind of biological weapon system." The implications hit me like ice water. These creatures weren't just using tools. They were manufacturing ammunition from their own bodies or environment, turning the abyss itself into an arsenal. Javi tried switching to backup cameras, but the displays remained dark. They took out every single visual system. That's not luck. That's precision targeting. The clicking sounds around us shifted, becoming more rhythmic and coordinated. Through the hydrophones, I could hear the acoustic exchanges growing more complex, like battlefield communications. "They're coordinating something else," Ben said, monitoring the patterns. "Different rhythm, more urgent." That's when the second wave hit. Instead of the sharp pings of projectiles, this attack came as wet splats against our hull, thick, viscous impacts that stuck rather than bounced off. "New contact type," Ben reported, studying his readings. "Organic material, high adhesive properties, it's hitting our thruster ports." Javi immediately tried to test our propulsion systems, and his face went white. "Thrusters aren't responding. Something's jamming the rotation mechanisms." Ben pulled up the chemical analysis of the new substance coating our hull. "This is incredible. It's a fast-hardening resin, similar to barnacle cement but much more sophisticated. The molecular structure suggests it's designed specifically for mechanical sabotage. I watched Javi frantically work his controls, trying every backup system and emergency protocol. The thruster indicators showed power flowing to the motors, but the propellers themselves were locked solid. "We're dead in the water," Javi said. "Whatever that stuff is, it's turned our propulsion system into concrete." The Oracle began to drift with the deep current, no longer under our control. We were now a helpless target, floating blind in the territory of creatures that had just demonstrated military-level tactical coordination. "This was planned," I said, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. "They disabled our vision first, then our mobility. This isn't random animal behavior. This is warfare." Ben monitored the continuing acoustic chatter around us. "The communication patterns are definitely strategic. They're sharing information about our vulnerabilities, coordinating their attacks." I thought about the ancient carvings on the gate, the scenes of pale hunters surrounding surface dwellers. The Minoans hadn't been describing mindless monsters. They'd encountered an intelligent species with sophisticated biotechnology and military tactics. "How long can we survive on life support?" I asked. Ben checked our systems. "Oxygen recycling is functioning normally. We've got maybe 18 hours of breathable air, assuming no hull breaches." 18 hours. Floating helpless in the abyss while apex predators circled us like sharks. The clicking communications continued around us, and I could hear the satisfaction in their rhythmic exchanges. They'd successfully trapped their prey using weapons and tactics that would challenge modern military forces. Javi kept trying to restart the thrusters, but the organic cement held our propulsion systems in an iron grip. "This stuff is harder than concrete. Even if I could get outside to chip it off, we don't have the tools." The Oracle bobbed gently in the current, and I realized we were completely at the mercy of creatures that had been perfecting their hunting techniques for thousands of years. The ancient warning had been clear: death from below. And we'd sailed right into their carefully prepared trap. The clicking sound shifted again, becoming more synchronized and purposeful. Whatever they were planning next, they'd finished disabling our defenses. Now came the real hunt. The rhythmic clicking stopped. In the sudden silence, I found myself holding my breath, waiting for whatever came next. The absence of sound felt worse than the coordinated communications we'd been hearing. At least when they were talking, I knew where they were. Then it started, a slow, deliberate thumping on the Oracle's hull. Thump, thump, thump. The sound came from directly above us, each impact perfectly spaced and measured. Not random, not exploratory, purposeful. "What are they doing now?" Javi whispered, his hands frozen over the thruster controls. Ben hunched over his instruments, trying to track the source of the impacts. Single contact, directly overhead. Large object making deliberate contact with our hull. Thump. 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 The rhythm was hypnotic, almost familiar. I pressed my hand against my chest and felt my own pulse racing with terror. Then the realization hit me like ice water. "Ben," I said quietly, "check the timing of those impacts against your biomonitors." He pulled up the readings from our internal sensors, the ones that tracked crew vital signs for safety protocols. His face went white as he compared the data. "Perfect match," he whispered. "The impacts are synchronized with your heartbeat." The thumping continued, each strike timed exactly to my terrified pulse. Whatever was up there could somehow sense our physiological responses through the hull, reading our fear and playing it back to us like some twisted psychological warfare. How is that possible? Javi stared at the ceiling where the sounds originated. Ben's fingers moved across his analysis screens. Bioelectric fields, maybe. Or they could be reading micro vibrations in the hull caused by our cardiovascular systems. Either way, they know exactly how scared we are. The thumping shifted, matching the new rhythm as my heart rate spiked even higher. The creature above us was demonstrating its ability to monitor our internal state, to know our fear better than we did ourselves. I pressed against the main viewport, trying to see what was making the sounds. The emergency lighting created a pathetic cone of visibility, but beyond that lay only crushing darkness. The thumping continued overhead, a constant reminder that something intelligent was studying us like specimens in a jar. Then a pale face appeared inches from the glass. I jerked backward, my heart hammering against my ribs. The creature floated motionless outside our viewport, close enough that I could see every detail of its impossible anatomy. No eyes, just smooth alabaster skin stretched over a bulbous skull that was easily twice the size of a human head. The bone structure was clearly designed for something other than vision. Specialized chambers and cavities that spoke of advanced echolocation capabilities. Jesus Christ, Ben breathed, leaning closer to get a better look. The thing's head was unmistakably hominid, but evolved far beyond human limitations. The enlarged cranium housed what had to be incredibly sophisticated sound production and reception organs. This wasn't some random deep-sea monster. It was a relative of humanity, twisted and perfected by millions of years in the abyss. Its elongated fingers moved with disturbing dexterity, each digit tipped with webbed membranes that allowed perfect control in the water. The creature worked with careful precision, attaching something to our hull just below the viewport. "What is that thing doing?" Javi whispered. I watched the creature's movements, noting the intelligence behind every gesture. This wasn't instinctive behavior. It was the calculated work of a sophisticated predator using tools and technology. The organic device it attached looked like a translucent sac, roughly the size of a human head. The creature positioned it carefully against our hull, using what appeared to be natural adhesive secretions to bond it in place. Ben studied the thing through the glass, his scientific training warring with obvious terror. Look at the cranial development, the enlarged auditory chambers, the specialized bone structure. This is what humans might look like after millions of years of evolution in a high-pressure, lightless environment. The creature finished its work and turned toward our viewport. Where eyes should have been, smooth skin covered what were probably incredibly sensitive acoustic organs. It tilted its oversized head, and I had the distinct impression it was studying us as intently as we were studying it. Then it swam away, disappearing into the darkness with fluid grace that spoke of perfect adaptation to its environment. The organic device remained attached to our hull, pulsing with faint bioluminescent patterns that created shifting colors across its translucent surface. "What did it just do to us?" Javi asked. Ben monitored the device through our remaining sensors, his readings painting a disturbing picture. "Whatever that thing is, it's alive. Complex internal structure, active biological processes. It's definitely some kind of tool." The sac pulsed brighter, its bioluminescent patterns becoming more complex and rhythmic. The light show was beautiful and terrifying, clearly designed for a specific purpose that we couldn't yet understand. I stared at the creature's handiwork, remembering the ancient carvings on the gate. The Pale Hunters hadn't just been using primitive weapons. They'd developed biotechnology that turned living organisms into sophisticated tools. "This is what the Minoans encountered," I said. "Not monsters, but an advanced species with biological engineering capabilities." The device continued its pulsing display, and I realized we were looking at technology that had been refined over geological timescales. Whatever the creature had attached to our hull, It represented millions of years of evolutionary development focused on one goal: hunting surface dwellers who ventured into the deep. Ben's instruments detected new activity from the organic sac. It's starting to secrete something. Chemical composition is acidic, highly corrosive. The beautiful bioluminescent display wasn't just communication or intimidation. It was the activation sequence for a biological weapon designed to dissolve our only barrier against the crushing abyss. Ben's face went white as he studied the readings from our hull sensors. The acid is working faster than I thought. It's not just eating through the surface, it's breaking down the molecular bonds in the acrylic. I leaned over his shoulder, watching the chemical analysis scroll across his screen. The organic device pulsed with those beautiful, deadly lights while its secretions carved microscopic channels through our viewport. Each pulse seemed to accelerate the process, like the creature had programmed it to work in stages. "How long do we have?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. 30 minutes, maybe less." Ben pointed at the stress analysis diagram. The acid is creating microfractures that spread through the material. Once it reaches critical density, the whole viewport will fail catastrophically. Javi slammed his fist against the thruster controls, frustration boiling over. "Come on, you piece of junk." He tried every emergency protocol, every backup system, but the organic cement held our propulsion in a death grip. I pulled up our emergency procedures manual on my tablet, scrolling through protocols I'd memorized but never thought I'd need. Most of them assumed basic mobility or communication with the surface. None of them covered being trapped by intelligent predators using biological weapons. "There," I said, finding the section I'd been dreading. "Emergency EVA procedures for critical repairs." Ben looked up from his acid analysis. "You can't be serious. Someone has to go outside and break that resin off the thrusters manually." I read through the procedure, my stomach sinking with each step. It's the only way to restore propulsion. Javi stopped fighting with his controls and turned to face us. In complete darkness, surrounded by those things, with no backup if something goes wrong. "The atmospheric diving suit has its own life support and communication systems," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "And we've got cutting tools for maintenance work." Ben shook his head. "The suit's work lights were damaged in the first attack. Whoever goes out there will be working blind just like us." I stared at the EVA protocol, running through the logistics in my head. The Oracle carried one atmospheric diving suit, a bulky armored system designed for emergency repairs at depth. The person inside would be protected from pressure and cold, but completely vulnerable to whatever was waiting in the darkness. "I'll do it," Javi said quietly. "No." The word came out harder than I intended. "This is my expedition, my responsibility. And my piloting that got us into this mess." Javi's voice carried a weight of guilt I'd never heard before. "I pushed us past that gate when you wanted to turn back. This is on me." Ben's instruments beeped with another update on the acid's progress. 15% structural degradation and climbing. The molecular breakdown is accelerating. I watched the organic device pulse brighter, its bioluminescent display becoming more complex and urgent. The creature that had attached it knew exactly how long the acid would take to work. This wasn't random. It was a precisely timed execution. "The EVA suit is designed for someone my size," Javi continued. "I know the Oracle's external systems better than anyone, and I'm the one who got us trapped here." Ben pulled up the suit's specifications on his screen. Full atmospheric pressure, 8 hours of life support, integrated tool systems. But no external lighting and no way to see what's coming. I thought about the pale creatures circling us in the darkness. their sophisticated coordination and biological weapons. Sending someone outside would be like offering them a gift-wrapped target. "They'll be waiting," I said. "The moment you exit the airlock, they'll know." "Maybe." Javi was already moving toward the equipment locker where the EVA suit was stored. "But they might not expect us to fight back. They've been hunting surface dwellers for thousands of years, probably never had anyone try to escape before." Ben's readings showed the acid eating deeper into our viewport, creating a web of microscopic cracks that would soon reach critical mass. 22 minutes until probable hull failure. I watched Javi pull the atmospheric suit from its storage compartment, the bulky system designed to keep a human alive in the most hostile environment on Earth. The suit looked like medieval armor crossed with a spacesuit, thick metal plates and reinforced joints that could withstand crushing pressure. "This is insane," I said. "Yeah." Javi started checking the suit systems, running through pre-EVA diagnostics with practiced efficiency. "But it's the only chance we've got." Ben monitored the continuing acoustic chatter from the creatures around us. "They're still out there. Multiple contacts maintaining formation. They know we're trapped." I helped Javi with the suit's complex harness system, my hands shaking as I secured the life support connections. The atmospheric diving suit was humanity's answer to the abyss, a bubble of surface pressure and breathable air that could keep someone alive in the crushing depths. 20 minutes, Ben announced. "The acid is reaching the viewport's inner layers." Javi sealed his helmet and activated the suit's internal systems. His voice came through the comm with mechanical clarity. "Life support is green. Tool systems are operational. I'm ready to cycle the airlock." I stared at him through the helmet's thick faceplate, knowing this might be the last time I saw him alive. The creatures outside had demonstrated military-level coordination and biological weapons that could disable our technology. Sending him into their territory was like feeding him to sharks. But the math was brutal and simple. Without thruster power, we were all dead anyway. The bioacid would finish its work, our viewport would implode, and the abyss would claim 3 more victims to add to whatever collection the Pale Hunters had been building for millennia. 18 minutes, Ben said quietly. Javi moved toward the airlock, his armored suit clanking with each step. "Once I'm outside, get ready to fire the thrusters the moment I free them. We'll have seconds before that acid finishes its work." I nodded, though he probably couldn't see me clearly through the helmet's limited vision system. "Be careful out there." "Careful went out the window when we crossed that gate," Javi said. "Now we just survive." The airlock cycled with a hiss of equalizing pressure, and I watched our only hope disappear into the crushing darkness of the abyss. The atmospheric diving suit felt like wearing a tank. Every movement required deliberate effort as Javi ran through the final system checks, his voice crackling through the comm with mechanical precision. "Life support shows 8 hours. Tool systems are green. Pressure seals are holding." He tested the articulated arms, the heavy manipulators designed for maintenance work at crushing depths. "Cutting torch is operational, but remember, no external floods." I helped him secure the final connections, my hands shaking as I locked the umbilical that would keep him tethered to the Oracle. The suit was humanity's answer to the abyss, but it looked pathetically fragile compared to what we'd seen outside. "Ben, how much time do we have?" I asked. Ben glanced up from his acid analysis, sweat beading on his forehead. 12 minutes, maybe less. The molecular breakdown is accelerating." The organic device pulsed brighter against our viewport, its bioluminescent display becoming more urgent, beautiful and deadly, counting down to our destruction with alien precision. Javi moved toward the airlock, each step clanking against the Oracle's deck plates. The moment I free that last thruster, you fire everything we've got. Don't wait for me to get back inside. Javi. No arguments, Alara. If that viewport goes, we're all dead anyway. Get us to the surface. Ben pulled up the emergency ascent protocols on his screen. I've got the ballast systems ready. We can dump everything and rocket straight up, but the decompression rate will be dangerous. More dangerous than staying here? Javi sealed his helmet, the thick faceplate reflecting our emergency lighting. Cycle me through. The airlock hissed as it equalized pressure, and I watched our only hope disappear into the crushing darkness beyond. Through the deteriorating viewport, I could see nothing but black water and the pulsing glow of the bioacid device. Javi, report, I said into the comm. I'm out. His voice came through with strange clarity, the suit's communication system cutting through the water like it was air. Jesus, it's dark out here. I can't see anything past my work light. Ben monitored the external sensors, tracking Javi's progress through acoustic signatures. You're showing up on sonar. First thruster port is 3 meters to your left. I pressed against the viewport, trying to catch a glimpse of Javi's work light in the abyss. The tiny beam created a pathetic cone of visibility, maybe 2 meters at most. Beyond that lay infinite darkness where intelligent predators waited and watched. Found the first port, Javi reported. This resin is like concrete, going to take some serious work to chip it off. The sound of his cutting tools came through the comm, sharp, rhythmic scraping as he attacked the organic cement. Each strike sent vibrations through the water that our hydrophones picked up, advertising his location to anything listening. Careful with the thruster housing, Ben warned. Those mechanisms are delicate. Too much force and you'll damage the rotation assembly. I know what I'm doing. Javi's breathing was steady but labored, the physical effort of working in the bulky suit taking its toll. This stuff is incredible, though. It's not just hardened, it's actually bonded to the metal at a molecular level. Ben studied the readings from Javi's suit sensors. The resin contains metallic compounds that create chemical bonds with our hull. It's not just glue, it's biological welding. I watched the bioacid device pulse brighter, its countdown becoming more urgent. How much time, Ben? 8 minutes until critical failure. The viewport is developing stress fractures. Through the comm, I could hear Javi working frantically, his tools scraping and chipping at the hardened resin. The sound echoed through the water, and I knew every creature in the area could track his exact position. First thruster is free, Javi announced, moving to number 2. Ben's sonar showed him moving along the Oracle's hull, his work light creating a tiny moving star in the vast darkness. Second port is 4 meters aft. Same level. That's when the clicking started again. Faint at first, barely audible through the hydrophones. But the pattern was unmistakable. Multiple sources, coordinating their positions around Javi's worksite. They're back, Ben whispered, studying his acoustic readings. 3 contacts, maintaining distance but closing slowly. I keyed the comm. Javi, you've got company out there. I hear them. His voice stayed steady, but I could hear the tension underneath. Not stopping now. We're too close. The clicking grew more frequent, more urgent. Through Ben's instruments, I could track the creatures moving in a coordinated pattern around Javi's position. They weren't attacking yet, but they were definitely planning something. Second thruster is almost clear, Javi reported. This resin goes deep into the mechanism. Going to need another minute. 6 minutes until viewport failure, Ben announced. The acid is eating through the inner layers. I watched the stress fractures spread across our window like a spider web, each crack weakening the barrier between us and the crushing abyss. The bioacid device pulsed in perfect rhythm, its alien countdown marking our approaching death. Got it, Javi said. Second thruster is free, moving to the final port. The clicking sounds shifted, becoming more synchronized and aggressive. Whatever patience the creatures had been showing was running out. They're moving closer, Ben warned. All 3 contacts converging on your position. Through the comm, I could hear Javi's breathing getting heavier as he worked on the final thruster. The cutting tools scraped frantically against the organic cement, racing against time and the approaching predators. This one's worse than the others, Javi said. They put extra resin on the main propulsion unit. It's going to take 4 minutes, Ben interrupted. The viewport is reaching critical stress levels. I stared at the spreading cracks, knowing that when they reached critical density, the entire window would implode in milliseconds. The abyss would rush in with the force of a bomb, crushing everything in its path. Almost there, Javi said, his tools working desperately. Just need to clear the rotation housing. The clicking sounds grew louder, more urgent. Through the hydrophones, I could hear the creatures communicating in rapid bursts, their coordination becoming military precise. They're at 20 meters and closing, Ben reported, all 3 contacts moving in formation. I gripped the thruster controls, ready to fire the moment Javi freed the final propulsion unit. Our emergency ascent would be violent and dangerous, but it was our only chance of reaching the surface before the viewport failed. Come on, Javi, I whispered into the comm. We're running out of time. The bioacid device pulsed brighter, its beautiful, deadly light show reaching crescendo. In the spreading cracks of our viewport, I could see our reflection. 3 humans, trapped in a metal bubble, waiting for either salvation or death in the crushing darkness of the abyss. Last thruster is almost... Javi's voice cut off abruptly. Through the comm, I heard the sharp clang of his cutting tool hitting metal, followed by a sound that made my blood freeze, the whistle of rushing water. Javi, report! I grabbed the comm controls, my voice cracking with panic. Ben's sonar screen exploded with movement. 3 large contacts converged on Javi's position from different angles, moving with terrifying speed and coordination. They're on him, Ben shouted. Multiple contacts all sides. The comm crackled with the sound of Javi's panicked breathing and the mechanical whir of his suit's emergency systems. I could hear him grunting with effort, the cutting tool scraping against something that definitely wasn't resin. Get off me! Javi's voice came through distorted, his suit's speakers straining. Jesus, they're fast! Ben tracked the chaos through his instruments, watching acoustic signatures dance across his screen in patterns that spoke of coordinated assault. 3 attackers, moving in formation. They planned this. I pressed against the cracked viewport, desperate to see something in the darkness beyond our failing emergency lights. The bioacid device pulsed brighter, its countdown reaching critical urgency as stress fractures spread across the acrylic like lightning. 2 minutes until viewport failure, Ben announced, his voice tight with terror. Through the comm, I heard the sharp crack of Javi's cutting tool connecting with something solid, followed by an alien shriek that came through the water like fingernails on glass. One of the attackers had been hit. Got one of them, Javi gasped. But there's another. His words turned into a sharp cry of pain that cut through me like a blade. The sound of his breathing changed, becoming labored and desperate. Javi, what happened? Something hit me, punctured the suit. I'm losing pressure. Ben's readings showed Javi's suit systems going haywire, pressure alarms screaming as the atmospheric integrity failed. His life support is compromised. He's got minutes before the suit floods. I watched the stress fractures spread across our viewport, knowing we were seconds away from catastrophic failure. The math was brutal. Javi was dying out there, and we were about to implode. Final thruster. Javi's voice came through weak, but determined. Almost got it. The sound of his tools resumed, desperate scraping against the organic cement while his suit's alarms wailed in the background. Through the hydrophones, I could hear the remaining attackers regrouping, their clicking communications becoming urgent and coordinated. "They're coming back," Ben warned. "2 contacts, moving to intercept." "Come on. Come on," I whispered, my hands poised over the thruster controls. The viewport gave a sharp crack that echoed through the Oracle's hull like a gunshot. A spiderweb of fractures spread across the entire surface, and I could see water beginning to seep through the microscopic gaps. 90 seconds, Ben said quietly. Through the comm, I heard Javi's cutting tool strike metal with a final, decisive clang. "That's it. Final thruster is free." I didn't wait for confirmation. My hand slammed down on the thruster controls, firing every propulsion system at maximum power. The Oracle lurched upward with violent force, throwing me against my workstation as we rocketed toward the surface. "Javi, get to the airlock now." Through Ben's sonar, I could see him moving desperately along our hull, his damaged suit leaving a trail of escaping air bubbles. The remaining attackers pursued him, their pale forms darting through the water with predatory grace. "They're right behind him," Ben reported. "He's not going to make it." The Oracle's hull groaned under the stress of our emergency ascent, metal plates flexing as we climbed through the crushing depths. Our ascent rate was dangerously high, but staying down meant certain death. "Airlock," Javi gasped through the comm. "Almost there." I heard the mechanical cycling of the outer hatch, followed by the hiss of equalizing pressure. Through the internal cameras, I watched Javi tumble into the airlock chamber, his atmospheric suit trailing water and blood. "He's in," Ben announced, cycling the lock. The viewport chose that moment to fail catastrophically. The entire acrylic panel imploded with a sound like thunder, seawater blasting into our cabin with the force of a fire hose. Emergency blast shields slammed down milliseconds later, sealing the breach, but not before the Oracle's interior was soaked with freezing seawater. "Hull breach contained," Ben reported, his voice shaking. "Emergency barriers are holding." I kept the thrusters at maximum power, driving us upward through the thermal layers like a bullet. The Oracle's hull protested with every meter, stress alarms screaming as we climbed too fast for safe decompression. "Ascent rate is critical," Ben warned. "We're pushing the hull beyond design limits." "Better than staying down there," I said, watching our depth gauge spin backward as we rocketed toward the surface. Through the internal cameras, I could see Javi collapsed in the airlock, his atmospheric suit cracked and leaking. Blood seeped through a puncture in the side plating, but he was breathing and conscious. "Javi, how bad is it?" "Hurts like hell," he replied, his voice weak but steady. "Something sharp went right through the suit, but I'm alive." Ben monitored our ascent, tracking the Oracle's structural integrity as we climbed through the crushing depths. 3,000 meters and rising. Hull stress is approaching critical levels. I kept the thrusters firing, knowing that slowing down meant giving the creatures below time to pursue us. Through the hydrophones, I could still hear their clicking communications, but the sounds were fading as we left their territory behind. 2,000 meters, Ben announced. "We're going to make it." The Oracle shuddered as we passed through another thermal layer, our rapid ascent creating turbulence that rattled every system. But the hull held together, and our depth gauge continued its backward spin toward salvation. 1,000 meters. I can see sunlight on the surface cameras. I finally allowed myself to breathe as the crushing darkness of the abyss fell away below us. We'd escaped the Pale Hunters and their ancient territory, but barely. The Oracle's hull was damaged, our equipment was destroyed, and Javi was injured. But we were alive. "Surface contact," Ben reported. "The Aegean Explorer is standing by for recovery." I looked back at the internal camera showing Javi in the airlock, noting how he kept touching the wound in his side. The puncture looked clean, almost surgical, like it had been made by something designed for precision rather than destruction. "Recovery team is deploying," Ben said. "We're going home." As the Oracle broke the surface and sunlight flooded our cameras, I wondered what we'd really encountered in the depths. The ancient warning had been clear: death from below. But we'd survived, escaped their territory, and returned to tell the tale. Behind us, 4,000 meters down, the Pale Hunters retreated to their abyssal realm to wait for the next group of surface dwellers foolish enough to cross their boundaries. The gate stood as it had for millennia, marking the border between our world and theirs. But something told me this wasn't over. The way that creature had struck Javi, the precision of the wound, the almost surgical nature of the attack, it felt less like a failed killing blow and more like something else entirely. Something deliberate. I sat in the plastic chair beside Javi's medical bed, watching him pick at the bandage on his side. The Aegean Explorer's medical bay smelled like antiseptic and recycled air, a sharp contrast to the salt spray and diesel fumes on deck. "The doc says you're lucky," I said, though the word felt wrong in my mouth. Nothing about what we'd experienced felt like luck. Javi shifted against his pillows, wincing slightly. "Yeah, lucky. That's one way to put it." 6 hours had passed since we'd broken the surface, and the whole experience already felt like something that had happened to other people. The corporate representatives had been thorough in their debriefing. Ben had spent 3 hours in a conference room explaining equipment failures and pressure-related malfunctions. The official report would blame everything on mechanical problems at depth. "They're calling it inconclusive," I said. "The footage we managed to save is too degraded to be useful, apparently." Javi nodded, but his attention seemed elsewhere. He kept rubbing his temples with slow, circular motions, like he was trying to work out a headache. "You okay? The medical team said you might have some pressure-related effects." "Just this clicking sound," he said. "Started about an hour ago. Doc thinks it's tinnitus from the rapid ascent." I leaned closer, studying his face. The color was good, his breathing steady, but something felt off. Maybe it was just the aftermath of what we'd been through, but Javi seemed different somehow, more distant. "Can you describe the clicking?" He closed his eyes, concentrating. "Rhythmic, like sonar pulses, but really faint. Probably just my ears adjusting to normal pressure." The wound on his side caught my attention again. I'd seen it when they first brought him in, before the medical team cleaned and bandaged it. The puncture looked too clean, too precise for something that had happened during a chaotic attack in the darkness. "Javi, when that thing hit you, what exactly did you feel?" His eyes opened, focusing on me with an intensity I hadn't seen before. Sharp pain, then pressure, like something was being pushed into the wound rather than just cutting through. "Pushed in?" "Yeah." He touched the bandage gently. The medical team said it was probably debris from the suit's outer plating, but it felt more deliberate than that, more controlled. I thought about the creatures we'd encountered, their sophisticated coordination and biological weapons. Everything they'd done had been precise, calculated, purposeful. The idea that their final attack had been random debris didn't fit the pattern. "The clicking, is it constant?" "Comes and goes. Gets stronger when I concentrate on it." Javi rubbed his temples again, his movements becoming slower and more rhythmic. "Actually, it's getting pretty loud right now." His breathing began to change, becoming deeper and more regular. The tension in his shoulders eased, and his hands dropped to his sides. "Maybe you should rest," I said. "It's been a hell of a day." "Yeah." His voice was getting softer, more distant. "Rest sounds good." Javi's eyes drifted closed, and within minutes his breathing settled into the steady rhythm of sleep. I watched his chest rise and fall, noting how peaceful he looked despite everything we'd been through. The medical monitors showed normal vital signs: heart rate, blood pressure, oxygen saturation, all within healthy ranges. Whatever the clicking sound was, it didn't seem to be causing any physiological distress. I stood to leave, but something made me pause. Maybe it was the way Javi's head was positioned, or the slight movement behind his closed eyelids. But he didn't look like someone who had just fallen asleep. He looked like someone who was actively seeing something. His breathing remained perfectly steady, the kind of deep, regular pattern that usually took much longer to develop. And there was something about his posture, too alert, too focused for genuine sleep. I moved quietly toward the door, watching him for any sign of awareness. His eyes stayed closed, his breathing unchanged, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he was somehow tracking my movement across the room. The medical bay's automatic lights dimmed as I reached the threshold, responding to the reduced activity. In the softer illumination, Javi looked smaller somehow, more vulnerable, but also strangely content, like he was experiencing something pleasant behind those closed eyelids. I stepped into the corridor, leaving him to whatever rest he could find. The clicking sound he'd described was probably exactly what the medical team said: pressure-related tinnitus that would fade as his system readjusted to surface conditions. But as I walked away, I couldn't stop thinking about that wound, the precision of it, the way he'd described feeling something being inserted rather than torn, and the fact that in all our encounters with the creatures below, nothing they'd done had been random or accidental. Behind his closed eyelids, Javi's world didn't fade to the expected darkness of sleep. Instead, the medical bay materialized around him in perfect detail, not through vision, but through something far more precise. Every surface appeared as a ghostly wireframe rendered in pale blue light. The walls, the medical equipment, the chair where I'd been sitting, all of it mapped with echolocation accuracy that surpassed anything human senses could achieve. He could see the corridor beyond the door, the network of pipes and cables running through the ship's infrastructure, even the subtle vibrations of crew members moving through distant compartments. The entire vessel was laid out before him like a three-dimensional blueprint, every detail captured in crystalline clarity. The clicking sounds weren't tinnitus. They were active sonar pulses generated by something that had been left behind during the attack, something that was now part of him, integrated into his nervous system with surgical precision. The barb hadn't been just a weapon. It had been a biological implant, designed to turn him into something he'd never been before. A scout. The Pale Hunters hadn't let him escape their territory. They'd sent him to the surface with a purpose, carrying their technology into the world above. And now, as he lay in the medical bay of a research vessel, Javi was seeing the surface world through their eyes for the first time. The clicking grew stronger, more complex, as the implant fully activated. Through the ship's hull, he could sense the vast ocean stretching in all directions, feel the thermal layers and current patterns that had been invisible to his human senses. But most importantly, he could sense the other vessels on the surface: research ships, cargo haulers, fishing boats, all of them carrying crews who had no idea that the abyss had just gained its first surface operative. The ancient boundary between the depths and the surface world had been crossed, and the Pale Hunters' patient expansion into new territory had finally begun.